6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now, before I get to tonight's case, I want to make sure that everyone out there knows that I have another channel. Actually, what I refer to as my main channel, my ASMR addiction, link in the description box. There are so many videos there, well over 1,000 videos, and there is a playlist of true crime videos from before I started this channel, so go check it out. And if you like what you see, please subscribe. Thank you so much. Okay, so tonight we are traveling on over to Germany. Shout out to all my friends in Germany. This case took place in 1976 and is the case of Anneliese Michel. Michel is her last name, not her middle name. Just wanted to make that clear. And if you have ever heard of the movie called The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which came out in 2005, that movie is loosely based on this true story. And I'll tell you a little bit about that movie at the end of the video. So let's get into this case. And I'll start with a little background on Anneliese. She was born on September 21st, 1952 in Liebling, sorry I mispronounced that, Bavaria, West Germany. Her family was Roman Catholic. She was raised by her parents, Joseph and Anna, and she had 3 sisters. Her father operated a sawmill. They were a very religious family, and they all attended Mass 2 times a week. Now, one day, when Anneliese was 16 years old, she was in school when suddenly, out of nowhere, she just blacked out and began walking around in a daze. She had no memory of this ever happening, but friends said she appeared to be in a trance-like state. And they just let it go at that point. But it happened again a year later. She woke up in a trance one night, having wet her bed. Her body went through a series of convulsions, and she was shaking uncontrollably. So, her parents took her to a neurologist. He examined her, and he stated that an EEG test showed, quote, a normal physiological alpha type brain activity, end quote. Later he went on to say, quote, I judged from the description I was given that this was probably a case of cerebral seizures of the nocturnal type with the symptoms of a grand mal epilepsy, end quote. So he was saying that based on what they told him, that's how he came to his diagnosis, even though the EEG test showed nothing. So he's just going on what they say. And he diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, which causes seizures, loss of memory, and visual and auditory hallucinations. It can also cause something called Geschwind syndrome, which is a disorder that causes hyper-religiosity. Now, in 1970, she went to a psychiatric hospital for more treatment because she was just not doing well at all. She was prescribed anticonvulsive drugs, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers while she was there. And reportedly, these medications were not helpful at all with alleviating her symptoms. In 1973, she began experiencing severe depression. She hallucinated while she was praying. She heard voices telling her that she was, quote, damned, and she would, quote, rot in hell. She had been taking meds for 5 years at this point, and she was becoming very frustrated with her medical treatment because it just wasn't helping her. She had also become intolerant of Christian sacred places and objects, such as a crucifix. One time she tried to enter a shrine, and she couldn't because the soil burned like fire. That's how it felt to her. Things like religious medals and pictures of saints sparkled so strongly to her that she couldn't even bear to look at them. It hurt her eyes. She also said that she was communicating with Mary, Jesus' mother. In 1973, she started attending the University of Würzburg. Classmates would describe her as withdrawn and very religious. She was still taking the meds while she was there, and she was still feeling unwell. She began to see the face of the devil everywhere she went. She felt that the devil was possessing her, and she and her family agreed that she needed some religious intervention, like an exorcism. Now, just to take a step back, exorcisms have existed for ages and ages and ages. And the practice was very popular in the Catholic Church in the 1500s, 1500. But by the year 1960, it was not something that was popular at all, okay? But when the movie The Exorcist came out in the 70s, and other similar movies and books, the practice started gaining popularity again. So Anneliese and her family started reaching out to local priests to help. And they were all refusing and saying, no, you need to go to a doctor. Go to a doctor. And at this time, her behavior had become even permission to perform the exorcism along with Ernst Alt, and they were instructed to do the exorcism in secrecy at the Michel home. So that is what they did. The first session was on September 24th, 1975. At this time, Anneliese stopped taking all her meds and stopped consulting with doctors. So these sessions went on for 10 months. There were a total of 67 sessions that lasted up to 4 hours at a time. During these sessions, it was revealed that she was possessed by at least 6 different demons, such as Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, Nero, and a priest named Fleischmann who had been disgraced. He was a local priest. So these demons would talk out of Anneliese's mouth. They would talk in a low growl. Sometimes they even spoke in Latin. Now the 2 priests that were doing the exorcism, they took that to mean this was definitely for real. She was definitely possessed because she was speaking in Latin. But it turns out she knew Latin. She had learned it in school. So anyway, sometimes the demons would argue with each other, believe it or not. One time, supposedly, Hitler had said through her mouth, quote, "People are stupid as pigs. They think it's all over. After death, it goes on," end quote. Judas had spoken of Hitler by saying that he was nothing but a, quote, "big mouth who had no real say in hell." Anneliese often talked about, quote, dying to atone for the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church, end quote. During the sessions, many times her mother would restrain her while the priests performed the rites, which was something like throwing holy water at her or saying prayers. She would jerk around violently and sometimes even hit herself. And supposedly this is how she got a lot of bruises and injuries and black eyes. Not that they were beating her, from what is being said. She also spent so many hours kneeling and standing up hundreds of times a day in prayer that she had broken the bones and tendons in her knees, but yet she continued to do it. She would use a pillow, but still. And slowly she stopped eating and drinking. She would refuse to eat or drink anything. And reportedly, when they tried to force feed her, she would spit out the food or she would firmly press her lips together. She chipped her tooth by biting the wall, and she repeatedly bit herself and struck at others. Now, sadly, she ultimately died after 10 months of the exorcism process on July 1st, 1976, at her home. She was 23 years old. The autopsy report noticeably emaciated. Like, nobody could say that they didn't see that coming. She also had broken knees and pneumonia at the time of death. The state prosecutor said that her death could have been prevented as late as 1 week before she had died, meaning if they would have just taken her to the hospital a week before she died, she would have lived. And her parents, Anna and Joseph Michel, along with the 2 priests, Ernst Alt and Arnold Renz, they were charged with negligent homicide. The parents hired Erich Schmidt Leichner as their attorney. He had been a defense attorney during the Nuremberg trials, and the priest's defense was paid for by the church. The trial began on March 30th, 1978. Doctors testified, stating that she was not possessed by demons at all, but rather her symptoms were the psychological effect of her strict religious upbringing coupled with her epilepsy. The defense argued that the exorcism was legal and the German Constitution protected citizens in the unrestricted exercise of their religious beliefs. The defense played tapes that were recorded during the exorcism sessions, where the people could hear what sounded like demons arguing with each other to prove that she was possessed. And the 2 priests claimed that she was finally freed of the demonic possession before she had died. Her parents, on the other hand, still believed she was possessed, but didn't really feel that she was freed of the demonic possession, so they were, feeling pretty miserable. Knowing that, or thinking that her daughter had died and was still possessed even in death. The bishop who had given permission, Bishop Stangl, he said he was not aware at all of Anneliese's medical condition. He did not testify in court, but he did state that in the future, if he were to permit an exorcism, it would only be if a medical doctor was present during the rituals. The prosecutor had requested that all 4 of the suspects be found guilty, but he didn't want anyone to serve jail time. He wanted the priests to be fined, and he felt that the parents had been punished enough and didn't need to go through anything more. But in April of 1978, all 4 of them were convicted of negligent homicide, but they were given a suspended sentence and 3 years of probation. So nobody went to jail. After the trial was over, the Michel family asked if their daughter's body could be exhumed, because she had been buried in a big hurry in a cheap coffin. And in truth, they had been told by a nun that she had had a vision that Anneliese's body was still intact in the coffin after these years had passed, which would be a sign that she was still possessed, and they wanted to see if it was true. So she was exhumed on February 25th, 1978. So about 2 years after she died, she was exhumed. And her remains were put in a new oak coffin lined with tin. But the official reports stated that her body bore signs consistent with deterioration of a corpse of that age, so she was not intact like the nun had said. Anneliese Michel continues to be an icon for some Catholics, even today, who feel that modern interpretations of the Bible are distorting the ancient supernatural truth that it contains. According to a reporter named Franz Barthel, who reported during the trial, he said, quote, "The surprising thing was that the people connected to Michel were all completely convinced that she had really been possessed. Buses, often from Holland, I think, still come to Michel's grave. The grave is a gathering point for religious outsiders. They write notes with requests and thanks for help and leave them on the grave. They pray, sing, and travel on." End quote. Now, the movie that I mentioned in the beginning, called The Exorcism of Emily Rose, was released in 2005. The part of Anneliese was played by Jennifer Carpenter, She needed an IV, a feeding tube. That is what she needed. It wasn't a time to try to reason with her, try to get her to eat, hold her down and try to make her eat. None of that. They should have brought her to the hospital. Okay, but they didn't. They just watched while she died. Now, I know they all four believed that she was possessed. They didn't believe that it was a psychological or a medical condition. They really did not believe in the treatment of doctors. And that is what got them to this point. And you can say, well, she was 23, so it was up to her to get herself the necessary medical treatment. But clearly, she was extremely psychotic. And not only was she psychotic, when you get to that level of starvation, your mind doesn't work at all. Like, you can't even think clearly. So that just made things worse. So yes, the parents and the priests should have been held responsible, as they were. So the next question. It was said that exorcism is a religious right, that it's protected by the German Constitution. People are allowed to practice their religion as they see fit. If they want to do exorcisms, that should be up to them. So, do we agree? Well, I honestly don't know much about it, okay, to be honest. I suppose if all parties agree and the person who's getting exorcised is not mentally ill, a person who is able to make their own decisions, if they want to do it, I suppose they should be allowed to, so long as there is no violence involved and nobody will be harmed physically or mentally, then I suppose it would be okay. But like I said, I really don't know much about it. But in this instance, obviously a lot of harm came to her, and she paid with her life. So that makes it a lot different than just trying to say it was a religious freedom. Now I'm trying to imagine that in today's day and age, trying to go to court and trying to prove that somebody was possessed by demons would not be taken seriously by any jury. And I guess it really wasn't then either, but I can't even imagine a lawyer trying to use that as a defense. But what else could they have done? So anyway, that is about all I have for today. Thank you so much for joining me